The first time I heard that the Titanic had been sunk purposely, I thought that was the most ridiculous conspiracy theory I'd ever heard. And we're talking of perhaps more than 10 years ago when I first heard this. Um, but if you are a sincere truth seeker and you are humble and open to receiving truth and willing to follow the truth wherever it takes you, you eventually find out that some of the things that we brush off and deny as being true, they very often turn out to be true. Um, there's actually a saying, in English they say, truth is stranger than fiction, and that's very true when it comes to not only the Titanic, the sinking of the Titanic, but also many other such incidents. Um, I think we have to bear in mind how wicked and evil not only the devil is, but all those who are working with him. They'll do everything and anything to take control of this world. And all the major events that have happened on this earth, whether it be World War One, maybe going as far. I mean, all the wars that have been fought on this earth have been about trying to bring about a new world order, which is like I explained in my one of my recent videos. It's where the Catholic Church basically takes control of this world, because the Catholic Church is, as it says in Revelation 13, has been given the its seat and power and authority by the devil. So remember that just as Christ is a church, the devil also has a church as well, because the devil counterfeits and imitates God. So yes, just getting back to the issue of the Titanic. Like I was saying, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that the Titanic could have been built to be sunk. Maybe it's because I didn't understand the other issues that were actually behind the whole reason for the sinking of the Titanic. I think that very often that's what causes people to refuse to accept. I mean, for instance, 9/11. When you tell sometimes we call them NPCs, non-player characters. When you tell those who believe in the mainstream narrative of everything, when you tell them that certain things uh, are not the way we've been told. Like I was giving the example of 9/11, that basically that was an inside job. A lot of NPCs will, they will mock you and make fun of you, and call you once again a conspiracy theorist, which is actually a term that was coined by the CIA after the JFK assassination to stop Americans and other researchers, questioning the official narrative behind JFK assassination. And of course, I've said it many times in my videos. I might, if I feel impressed to do a video on the JFK assassination, I might one day make a video about that. But just for those maybe who are curious, JFK was assassinated by his own government, specifically by the CIA, the Mossad, and the mafia, and that was because he didn't want a central. He wanted to destroy the CIA. He wanted to print his own government money, which was going to put the Federal Reserve out of business. Which is actually one of the connections. That's why I've called this video the Titanic Connections. This is one of the connections to the sinking of the Titanic, was the issue of money and banking, and also he didn't want these forever wars, so they had to take him out. So anyway, so when you talk about 9/11, some people will react as if you're mad when you say that it was an inside job. Once again, it was the CIA and Mossad that were behind that, and the FBI. I don't know if you've noticed a pattern with the FBI that they will properly investigate small cases, but when something big happens and it's been done by the government, it always ends up being a cover-up. Just like with the Epstein list at the moment that they are helping to cover up. So what we have to understand with the Titanic and why it was sunk purposely is because there was a move to introduce a central bank in America. Now, I'm not going to like read everything. That's only because I just realized when I printed my notes out, I was just that there's too much to read. I don't think you guys who watch my videos, appreciate me doing a lot of reading. Um, that there had been some central banks in America that had been introduced in America, but they were always temporary. So, but the Catholic Church and the Jesuits, remembering that the Jesuits are the Knights Templar, and the Knights Templar were the first international bankers. Um, uh, and when they were abolished, they went underground and came up as the Illuminati, and then from there they they created the Jesuit order, and the person in the lead was the visible person in the lead of the Society of Jesus, commonly known as the Jesuits, was Ignatius Loyola. But some say that it was actually Francis Borgia, um, and that there were some other very powerful people behind Ignatius Loyola. So, but what I'm trying to say is, in making the connection between the Templars and the Jesuits, is that the Templars were the first international bankers. And when they were abolished, they basically went into hiding, but they used front organizations such as the Illuminati. It's interesting that when the Jesuits were also abolished, they used Adam Weishaupt, who was a Jesuit himself at Ingolstadt University in Germany, to create the Illuminati. So they used many fronts. But anyway, the Jesuits wanted a central bank in America. They'd never had a permanent central bank in America, which is one of the reasons why Abe Lincoln was assassinated, by the way. He also didn't want a central bank as well. So there were some men and women, some very rich men and women who were opposed to the setting up of a central bank in America, and there were three particular men who were very rich at the time. We're talking of around the 1912 period, who were opposed to the setting up of a central bank in America, and these men were Benjamin Guggenheim, Isador Strauss, and John Jacob Astor. And John Jacob Astor was actually said to be the richest person in the world at the time. Excuse me. So in 1910, there were seven men who met on an island called Jekyll Island. And I'll just mention some of their names here. These men were Nelson Aldrich, Frank Vanderlip, both representing the Rockefeller financial empire. That's another connection to the Titanic, was the Rockefellers. Then there was Henry Davison, Charles Norton, and Benjamin Strong, representing J.P. Morgan. He's a character that I'm going to be mentioning quite a lot, J.P. Morgan. And then there was Paul Warburg. And then Paul Warburg is the one that who said that we'll have a world government, whether we like it or not. It's either going to be by consent or conquest. So these seven men met on Jekyll Island in secret, and having told the media that they were going there to hunt ducks. They were going there to do some duck hunting, which was a lie. And they were also referred to each other by first name on a first name basis only, because they didn't want to get discovered. So the reason why they met at Jekyll Island in 1910 was because they wanted to iron out how they were going to introduce a permanent central bank in America. And they managed to pull that off. And obviously the president at the time, who was a Jesuit puppet, was Woodrow Wilson, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Woodrow Wilson. And he signed the law, basically, that introduced the Federal Reserve, and which is behind the printing of the US dollar, which is basically paper money. It's not even real money. And we've had that central bank permanently there in America since 1913. So we've got 1910. We've got these men, these powerful men, meeting in secret at Jekyll Island. 1912 is when the Titanic sinks, and then 1913 is when December, specifically 1913, is when they passed a law to say that the Federal Reserve could be created to print money, and this law that was passed to enable the Federal Reserve to be created was passed when there were hardly any any senators, I think, in the, to vote this law in. It was only those who were in favor of voting this law in who were present. Most of them had gone on holiday. Bear in mind that this happened in December 1913, during the holiday period. So, when getting back to the Titanic, J.P. Morgan, who I mentioned earlier, he's the one who owned a company called the White Star Line. The White Star Line was the one that built the Titanic, as well as the Olympic, another ship called the Olympic, which looked very similar to the Titanic, and another ship as well that was called the Britannic. Sorry, I'm doing this from memory. I'm not going to read my notes because I don't want to bore you guys. There were three ships that were built by the White Star Line, and like I said, J.P. Morgan, who was also a banker, who had representatives at Jekyll Island, owned the White Star Line. So those three men that I mentioned earlier, Benjamin Guggenheim, Isador Strauss, and John Jacob Astor, were not the only rich men who were, and their wives, who were on that ship. There were many rich people that were coaxed into boarding the Titanic, not knowing that on its maiden voyage it was going to be sunk. So they all get on board this ship, and some other interesting characters I'm going to mention are Edward Smith, who was the captain, who had 26 years of experience of sailing through the Atlantic, and he knew that there were icebergs in that area. So, and another character was Francis Brown, who was the Jesuit provincial from that area, from Ireland, basically, from Northern Ireland. So he was the most powerful Jesuit. So when the ship set sail, Francis Brown, that Jesuit I've already mentioned, he boarded the Titanic, and it took photos of all the interesting characters that were supposed to be exterminated, that were supposed to be killed when the Titanic sunk. So this is also on a video that was made by National Geographic. This is one of the other things as well that convinced me that the Titanic was sunk deliberately, and it was actually Pastor Bill Hughes who wrote The Secret Terrorist, who referred me to that video by the National Geographic. I can't remember the exact title of the video, but if you look it up, I'm sure on YouTube or some other video sharing platforms, you'll find it. So Francis Brown took photos of those who were on board, specifically those who were of interest, who were supposed to be eliminated. And then before he came off the ship, before it made its last stop, when the ship made its last stop, Francis Brown came off. But before he did that, he made sure he gave Edward Smith instructions, final instructions to basically obey. Remembering that one of the most important things in the Jesuit order is the issue of obedience. So Edward Smith basically obeyed those orders, and he, after sailing for a few days, I think it was on the third day, he was racing. The ship was going too fast in that area of the Atlantic, with Edward Smith knowing he didn't need any warning from anyone to say he needed to slow down, because he had been sailing through. He had 26 years of experience, and he sailed through there many times. And there were some other ships as well that actually gave him warning that he needed to slow down. But like I said, he didn't need warning because he had a lot of experience. So the ship struck an iceberg, and everyone knows that the Titanic struck an iceberg. So there are some other theories that there were bombs on the ship. I don't know, but that led to the sinking of the ship. Another interesting theory that I've heard, that I've not necessarily read it, I think maybe it might have been a comment that was made in the comment section of another video that I watched, that there were actually gunshots that were heard after the Titanic had struck an iceberg, that there were gunshots that were heard. That could be true as well. Maybe they were making sure that all those men and women that were supposed to be eliminated would not make it off the Titanic, because remember there were many survivors, not as many as not in the majority, but there were some survivors because there were lifeboats that were lowered down, and those it was said that only women and children should get on the lifeboats, and obviously that was a way of making sure that those men who were supposed to be eliminated, who were opposed to the setting up of a Federal Reserve, would not make it off the Titanic alive. So yeah, so the ship, obviously we know the ship sunk. And another interesting theory as well that I've heard is that there was a swap that was done. Remember, I said that the Olympic, not the Britannic, there was a third ship called the Britannic, I believe it was. The Olympic looked very similar to the Titanic. That one of those ships, it can be a bit confusing sometimes, but one of those ships was damaged on another voyage, and I think that ship was the Olympic that was damaged. Excuse me. So it's said that they swapped the names. You know how the Titanic had Titanic written on it, the name Titanic on it, and the Olympic, sorry, would have said Olympic on it. That the names were swapped. J.P. Morgan knew that the Britannic, sorry, not the Britannic, the Olympic had been damaged. So now they then said that the Olympic was the Titanic, knowing that that ship was supposed to be sunk anyway with the richest people in the world that were opposed to the setting up of a Federal Reserve. So from now on, we would just say that it was the Titanic that sank. Obviously, J.P. Morgan went on to claim insurance. For those who are wondering why would they swap the names, J.P. Morgan made an insurance claim on the Titanic when it sank, and obviously got a very large sum of money because the Titanic was, I think at the time, they said that it was one of the biggest ships in the world, and there were some who said that even God couldn't sink that ship. And then you hear some Christians will say, yes, you're not supposed to say things like that. You see, you said the Titanic even God couldn't sink the Titanic, but look what happened even on its first voyage, not knowing that actually no, the sink was sunk purposely. So those are the connections to the Titanic. But I just wanted to mention a few more things at the very end here. So the reason for setting up a central bank in America was so the Jesuits. This is a very important point which I almost forgot to mention. The Jesuits could have a bottomless reservoir of money to fight their wars against Protestantism. Remember I said in one of my other videos that the first war that there have been many wars, hundreds of wars that have been fought throughout the history of the world, but the first war which was fought between the Catholics and the Protestants was the 30 Years' War. So the Jesuits have been waging war against Protestantism, and in the 30 Years' War, it was Catholic countries fighting with Protestant countries, even though the war was mainly centered in Germany. So, and one of the other ways, so with the exception of the setting up of the Federal Reserve, where the Jesuits wanted to make money to fight wars against Christianity and against Protestantism specifically, is the Jesuits also had in some centuries ago set up what's called as reductions, the communist reductions in Paraguay, where basically they used the Paraguay Indians as almost like slaves. Basically, they made them they made watches and baskets and mats and all these things, and then those things were shipped to Europe to be sold, and the Jesuits made money from that. And as a result of that, when the King of Portugal found out, because Paraguay was a colony of Portugal, and there were other kings as well in Europe who were not happy with the Jesuits. That's what kind of led to them being abolished. But that's another story. The central bank of America, which is called the Federal Reserve, which is not federal, and there are no reserves. As some have said many times, it's a privately owned bank with the majority shareholders being the Rothschilds. Because remember, in F. Tapasos's book, The Rulers of Evil, F. Tapasos said that the Rothschilds, who claim to be Jewish, and white European Jews, uh, and we know that Jesus and the biblical Jews were not white, but there are many people, even including researchers and others, who would think that the Jews are the ones who are running the world. They are not. They are just basically um, one of very many spokes in a wheel. The ones who are really pulling the strings is the Catholic Church, which is the old Roman Empire that has just changed its colors like a chameleon, and wears a Christian garb. So I was just talking about the majority shareholders in the Federal Reserve are the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the Morgans. And now, remember I was talking about J.P. Morgan. There's actually a bank called Morgan Chase Bank. When they say Morgan Chase Bank, the Morgan stands for J.P. Morgan, the family of J.P. Morgan. Um, so just to finish off, I just wanted to mention this is almost like a summary. Basically, the interesting connections were that the White Star Line company was owned by J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan was also involved in banking, and like I said, remember I said that Morgan Chase is that bank. Well, it's one of the biggest bank in America. It's partly named after J.P. Morgan or the Morgan family. There's also a theory that another ship called the Olympic was swapped with the Titanic because it had been damaged, so that JP Morgan could make an insurance claim on it when it sank, which I've already mentioned as well. Something else as well, JP Morgan funded Nikola Tesla's experiments. And when JP Morgan found out that Tesla wanted to provide free electricity, he stopped funding him. Because JP Morgan basically said to Tesla that, because Tesla was way ahead of his time, and I've already done a video talking about Nikola Tesla, as in my personal opinion, is one of the 12 men who made history. Tesla wanted to provide free electricity to the whole world, and that electricity was supposed to be provided wirelessly. But when J.P. Morgan found this out, he said, He said, I'm not going to fund anything that I can't put a meter on. So he stopped funding Tesla. And then another thing as well, Henry David, Charles Norton, and Benjamin Strong represented J.P. Morgan at the secret meeting at Jekyll Island, which I've already mentioned as well. So I believe 100% that the Titanic was sunk purposely, because there are too many coincidences. All these rich men and women. And also, before I forget, J.P. Morgan and his family and friends were also supposed to be on the Titanic, but and I think J.P. Morgan made an excuse and said he couldn't be on the ship because he was sick or something like that. There were just like on 9/11, there were many people that were warned not to be in the Twin Towers, because it was known that the towers were supposed to be demolished, and I use that word purposely because there were bombs inside the Twin Towers. Just like how there are some things that we find out after the event has happened. When after 9/11, there are lots of films and videos and even cartoons, like for instance the Simpsons that came out, and it showed that, and this is before 9/11. There were many films that we found out had predicted 9/11. Even in WWF wrestling, there was I think there were two wrestlers who were called the Twin Towers, and one of them, obviously with WWF being a fake wrestling, it's fake wrestling. I know that Hulk Hogan, who was one of the main characters in so-called professional wrestling, he passed away about 2 days ago. But there was someone in WWF wrestling who said that the Twin Towers were going to come down. All this was said before 9/11. So similar thing with the Titanic. When you start finding out all these facts, that J.P. Morgan, who had an interest in or involvement in the setting up of the Federal Reserve, is the one that owned the White Star Line that built the Titanic, and that there were men and women, rich men and women, who were opposed to the setting up of a Federal Reserve, and all these people were on the Titanic when it sunk, and then you have these Jesuits. Bear in mind that the Jesuits are the Knights Templar. Not the Knights Templar are the Jesuits. Francis Brown being the most powerful Jesuit in Ireland, and he went on the Titanic and took photos, and then somehow managed to get off the Titanic before it sunk. These are facts that can't be denied. So yeah, those are the Titanic connections that I wanted to talk about. That not everything is as it seems, and truth is stranger than fiction. But there are many more connections that can be made to the Titanic. It's what I've learned with when I really started like doing my own research and studying and reading with and using God's word as my my best reference book. I wanted to explain that it's like a puzzle. It's like you're putting a puzzle together. So the Titanic is just one puzzle piece that helps to put the picture together of what is actually happening on this earth and what is going to happen in the future. You can almost predict what's going to happen in the future because of making all these connections. It's like connecting dots. And we know that. I was even explaining to my wife, I think yesterday or the day before, that the devil works incrementally, because if he moves so quickly, then we will realize that we're being set up for deception. But and I was explaining to my wife that real money is silver and gold. Yeah, those two things have got value. Printed paper doesn't have value, like I've explained in one of my other videos. And the other thing is that things that have value are things like houses and land. Yes, there are other things as well besides those 5 things or 4 things that I've mentioned, but printed paper doesn't have value. It has value in our heads. So I was just explaining that. I was explaining this to my wife to say we went away, especially in America. It was I forget the president's name right now. I'll get back to him. But America stopped. There was a time when the US dollar used to be backed by gold, but that was stopped by one of the American presidents whose name escapes me for some reason right now. But and that was in 1971. So from there, the US dollar was then backed by oil. That's why it was called the petrodollar. But now it's almost like and obviously the US dollar was forced on oil producing countries by the American military, which is another side to the whole thing. And now we're in the process of going away from printed paper as currency to CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. So which are going to these central bank digital currencies will come with a lot of control, which printed paper doesn't have. Because if I go and do shopping with printed paper, no one can tell. The authorities can't tell what I've purchased with my money. But with digital currencies, everything that you buy and everything that you sell will be recorded, and there can be controls that can be put on that money, such as it having an expiry date and you not being able to spend it a certain distance away from your home, because they'll say that because by traveling you're emitting emissions which contribute to climate change, with climate change being a hoax. So yeah, so that's where we are in the process of stopping the use of printed paper, and we're moving into digital currencies. And initially, those two things will work side by side, but eventually, printed paper is going to be abolished. We know this. I know this for a fact because they what the devil wants ultimately is total power and control over mankind, and in fact, to the extent that he wants to enslave us and force us to worship him. That's what Revelation 13 is talking about when he talks about the issue of buying and selling. Yeah, so I really had to think hard who that president was that put a stop to the US dollar being backed by gold. It was President Richard Nixon, the one who said that I'm not a crook, even though he was a crook. Just like Bill Clinton said he did not have sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky when he did. So yeah, I actually had to put the video on pause because it was really bothering me because I couldn't remember his name. But yeah, it was the Richard Nixon. He put an end to the US dollar being backed by gold in 1971. So like I was saying, yeah, we're moving towards CBDCs now, and eventually the CBDCs, along with Sunday, are going to be foisted on the whole world. And once again, just like I didn't accept that the Titanic was sunk purposely, there may be some of you who are watching this video who just think this is preposterous, that will never happen. But yeah, keep watching, but I also encourage you to do your own studies or own research, and not just to believe what I'm saying. And I guarantee that if you do thorough research, not just only on the issue of the sinking of the Titanic, but on other issues as well that I've mentioned in a lot of my videos, whether it be banking, public education, the control of religion through the Vatican, Freemasonry and secret societies, and the media, and how it's controlled, and that TV is basically propaganda. All these things that I've mentioned, that I've been talking about in my videos. If you do your own research, thorough research, without being biased, you'll basically come to the same conclusions as I have. And one of the other conclusions you'll come to is that God's holy word, the Bible, especially the Bible when it's printed from the received, the Bibles that are translated from the received text, that God's word is true. That's the conclusion you'll come to as well. So I encourage you to keep doing your own research, watching good documentaries, and not believing what the authorities say or what the churches say or what the pastor says. Do your own research, have an open mind, but use your critical thinking skills, and God will show you the truth. But also at the same time, being humble as well, and you won't go wrong.